Good afternoon, everybody. Jason O'Dwyer from Master Electricians here. Hope you're well. We've just gone live, so you haven't missed anything. It is just a touch after 2 o'clock in Queensland. So I'm just waiting for everybody to log on. We're almost there. We've got about 25, 26, 28, 29, and I think we were expecting 30. So we're very close to what we were expecting on. Welcome to Zoom webinar. This is our new MEA facility that we've invested in, and we had invested in some time ago. It's getting a real workout at the moment, which is great. So if you haven't been here before, in the little drop-down menu, it might be at the top of your screen, etc. You'll see a Q&A panel. Because there are so many people on, I have muted everybody's microphone so I don't get any feedback. So as such, if you'll just hear me talking, you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation as well. But in the Q&A area, you can type your own questions. Now, we do have Emma on board at the moment. Emma will answer questions as we go if she knows what the answers are. And I will address them a little bit later if they're unresolved, etc. So you can ask a question now or save it to the end. It's up to you. So that's good. So today's session is part 2. Part 1 we held last week, which is about leave and taking leave. Jordan ran that. We've also recorded that. So if you missed out on the annual leave, sick leave, coronavirus, stand down isolation type stuff, if you've got any questions about that, have a look at that webinar. It's on the Facebook site, but it's also on the members website. You can watch that. If you've got any questions after that, you can give us a call, or if you want to, you can just give us a call. It's up to you. You can go from there. Today is, as it says on the screen there, part 2 is contingency planning for staff. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things today, and mainly about your preparation for what's happening and what I would be expecting that most businesses are already doing, but just some tips and things like that about contingency planning and what you might want to do, some if-then scenario running, but also talking about staff and how to keep staff calm. One of the things that the Prime Minister and each of the Premiers have been very strong about is to remain calm. Last night, they made some changes to clubs, pubs, things like that, because people weren't paying attention to the social distancing law advice. I've had a lot of calls today about what is essential work. Well, they haven't defined what essential work is. What they have defined is what's non-essential. And the non-essential is cinemas, churches, pubs, clubs, indoor sporting gyms, things like that. They're non-essential. So they've closed them down, okay? So effectively, that's what they've done. Work at this stage is not non-essential. It is essential by definition. So work will continue, okay? We need to keep abreast of the situation because it will change. But it's important for everybody to make sure you're following your state premier and the Prime Minister to make sure you're staying up to date as well. Obviously, we will pass that information on as soon as it becomes available, but for your own safety, just make sure you sort of get onto their Facebook groups and stuff like that of your local Premier and the Prime Minister, and you'll keep that information coming about what is seen as essential and non-essential. Malcolm is working very hard in the background. Malcolm Richards, our CEO, is working very hard in the background to make sure that emergency electrical work is seen as essential in the event that there was a total lockdown. And I don't think there will be much argument about that. However, we need to wait for the advice. There are no lockdowns at the moment. Everybody's supposed to be going to work. Everybody's supposed to be going to school. So it is all situation normal except for the pubs and clubs. From that point of view, our work needs to continue. But it doesn't mean that we don't need to do some planning. So let's get stuck into it. If I can get, doesn't want to work. Sorry, let me just do this one. There we go. So where to from here? Obviously, we've had increased staff and sick leave. We've had, in some cases, a reduction in consumer confidence and work and cash flow. So the questions are, how do you remain viable? Okay, and what are the things that you need to think about? From that point of view, the full picture of your business situation will include things like your pipeline, your contractual obligations, what your assets and liabilities are like at the present time. Again, your cash flow, and also your staffing. Those areas particularly will have a major effect. So in terms of contingency planning, your work pipeline, doing an evaluation on your pipeline to see what is actually going to continue and what might not. So for example, pubs and clubs, if you were doing major maintenance work for pubs and clubs around your local area, obviously that's going to dry up pretty quickly. Okay, so in actual fact, it's probably finished by now. So it's a situation that you might need to look for other work, and there is a little bit of other work around, and we are working in the background with governments across the whole country to try and push through government work to boost the market at the same time. Look at your suppliers and your completion dates. From your contractual obligations, if you've got contracts that say you have to supply certain gear, work closely with your suppliers. I'm not aware of any shortages with the suppliers at this stage. There has been some information come through about a rise in prices due to differences in where things are being manufactured at the moment. And there's maybe some shortage on bespoke items, so big pieces of equipment. But at this stage, the general wholesaling supply chain seems to be, we've got plenty of stock. There's stuff there to do. Contractual obligations, particularly for your business, if you do have contracts in place, you need to look at your extension of time clauses. You also need to look at your force majeure clauses. And also take into account what I said about suppliers, because some builders or some principal contractors will supply the gear for you just to install. So again, if they can't get that, where does that leave you? And again, in terms of your own contractual obligations, you need to understand what is a force majeure, what is a time delay, whose fault, when do you have to notify it of it, and how long is it? Okay, so very important. Assets and liabilities, obviously you need to know what assets and liabilities you've got, and that then matches with your cash flow. Cash flow management is going to be extremely important. I've had a few conversations again over the last couple of days with members. We have been discussing about, well, what are suppliers going to do? Are suppliers going to want, for example, for you to pay for equipment up front? Now, again, I haven't heard of anybody asking for that at the present time. However, does that mean that you might ask your consumer to actually buy that, say, air conditioner first, and pay for that first, order it, and then you go and install it? Now, what that does, it protects yourself from in your business, in that you've been paid for the supplies, but you haven't done any work, so to speak, or very little work. And if the customer says, "Oh, look, no, I can't go ahead with that. I've lost my job. I want to stop that project," and you say, "Well, you've paid for the air conditioner. Here it is. Give us a yell when you want it installed, or we can hang on to it. Whatever you want to do." But the main thing there is, does that mean that perhaps that you need to change your terms and conditions on your invoices about payment? I know for a company that I used to work for, we used to ask for 30% deposit. We then used to do 30% second payment at 50% completion of the job. And then final payment was on full and final completion of the job. Again, contractors in your own business, you need to think about your cash flow management to make sure you've got cash coming in and not have a lot of liabilities sitting out there with your staff and your suppliers that you then can't service. So cash will be king. So those sorts of variables, what's in your control, you can control your terms and conditions, you can control what contracts you're entering into and things like that. But you also have to decide about what you can't do without. You might have contracts in place that you do need to service. What staff do you need to keep to actually make sure those contracts are being fulfilled? So with that, doing some scenario testing, particularly maybe with your accountant or your own financial controller or things like that, looking at what happens if I lose 20%, 30%, 50%, 70% of my business that's coming in. What happens if it happens now or in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time? Running those sorts of scenarios and keeping those in the back of your mind will help you adjust and actually address the issue with your staff. A pinch of preparation means that you can give staff confidence that you're looking at the business and trying to keep it running as best you can. Okay, there will be contractors out there who won't be able to keep their businesses running. They don't know their costs. They don't know their suppliers. They may have bad relationships with their builders or principal contractors, etc. So it's really important at this time to keep a good eye on what's going on inside your business and have an understanding of what your if this happens, then I can do X. With those contingencies, what work is likely to remain, and also what areas might need to be explored. State governments, federal governments, and even local governments that I've heard of are all now trying to push forward projects, etc., to try and get work back into the community and keep it in the community so that people can keep working. I know personally for myself, I've had a few conversations with one of the government departments here in Queensland to try and get that process happening easier for small contractors who haven't tendered before for government work. And it's very infancy. So there are things that we can do. Have a look at the government Go tender sites, etc., about how you become a preferred supplier to state government, to local government. I know it's probably something that you may or may not have done before, but if you haven't done it before, it's an opportunity then at least to have a look at what's going on and maybe inform yourself about what sort of work is there. Governments tend to try and keep public works happening in these tight times. It happened during the GFC. It happened during the 1980s and the late 1980s, early 1990s. It's a usual government response for those sorts of things. Staffing. Your staffing is likely to be about 30% of your costs. In some industries, it's as high as 75, but from what we sort of know, it's about 30% of your costs. What I have noticed in the industry since I've been in the industry for about the last 8 years is that obviously chances are you're the only source of income for the employees. But what I've always been strong about with small employers, why I try and support small employers as strongly as we do, it's a situation where you do have the responsibility of providing work for all your employees. You pay mortgages off, you pay school fees, vacations, cars, health insurance, all that sort of stuff. And all of those things at the moment will be front of mind for most of your employees, as they are for you, okay? So we need to go through a process now of trying to bring people along and keeping them informed and trying to keep them calm. More information will give them more choices and it will give them more options, okay? And we'll talk about that a bit further. Your business but needs skilled staff to operate. So looking at what work might be coming in, you've then got the situation of what staff do I need to keep, okay? You might have a situation where you have more highly skilled staff that need to be retained in preference to other staff. There's some of the tough decisions that you might have to make. A skills audit is a really good way to do that because it will also help you down the track in terms of letting people go and picking people to go earlier than maybe some of the others. You need to evaluate and decide how best to get your business through the difficult period. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Some contractors will need to close their businesses for a while. And what we're trying to do with sessions like today is to try and give you some food for thought about how you might be able to alleviate that and try and control some of those other concerns. Most employers that I speak to and that we hear about on the phones every day here, most employers are concerned for their employees. There's no doubt about that. They are your business. They are the face of your business when you go to your customers. They are an important part of your business. And they are there to service the customers, and we want to keep that relationship as best we can. Okay? So to do that, we actually need to communicate with them. What do we need to communicate to them? Well, when work is drying up and if it's getting smaller in size, etc., and you've got a number of staff, then you've got a situation, you've got to make some decisions. Now, I'm going to use Qantas as a bit of an example. 2 or 3 weeks ago, Qantas laid off, didn't lay off, sorry. They asked staff to go on annual leave, RDOs, long service leave, and also take a week of leave without pay. So what they were asking staff is to do is to say, use 3 weeks of your accruals and take 1 week of leave without pay. Now, that was a strategy that they used to try and spread the load and to soften the cushion for everybody across the organisation. Now, it has changed since then because flights really now, because of border closing, etc., Qantas has had to lay off all their staff. What we're experiencing and what I'm expecting a lot of contractors to experience shortly is that same process. We're going to try our best to soften the blow for staff for as long as we can, but at some stage, some employers might actually have to shut. At the moment, the federal state governments are doing their best to keep construction and trades open and working because they realise it has a flow-on effect for a lot of people. There's not a lot they can do about the pubs and clubs, and that's a lot of people as well, but because of the transmission stuff, they can't do a lot for that. For construction and workplaces and the social distancing, they can do, and that's what they're trying to do at the moment. They are trying to keep workplaces open. So from your point of view, if you start to experience that slowdown in work, do you go through a process of talking to the staff and saying, okay, we're slowing down a little bit, we've got some annual leave, how about we take X number of days annual leave each, that way I can keep people employed, I've still got work coming in, etc., etc. RDOs. Long service leave, if they've got it. Now, the great thing about long service leave in many parts of the country, you do have long service leave funds that have been external to your company. There's a number of portable long service leaves funds around the country. If you are paying into those and you've got staff who are qualified for long service leave, that's a really good way to soften that blow. And going from there. Now, there might be some cash flow issues that come out of people taking leave, etc., because they're non-productive and you're running down your cash. Again, talk to your accountant about the managing of that and making sure that that cash flow is there. Hopefully, you've still got some work coming in to allow that to happen. As I said before, staff taking leave without pay also enables you to soften the load. So, for example, you could say, how about everybody go to a 4-day week because I've got enough work for 4 days and everybody takes 1 day leave without pay, okay? Spreads the load for everybody. Everybody still gets 80% of their wage, which is a lot better than nothing, or a lot better than one person losing everything, perhaps. So again, talking to your staff about that sort of issue and what you can do as a group to try and soften the load for everybody. And again, that then brings the issue around staff working part weeks. What it also does, particularly if they do leave without pay, it does allow them to see if they can pick up other work on that 1 day. So, you know, truck driving, packing shelves at the moment, helping out. There's a lot of government jobs going at the moment for contact centres and to helping out with the administration side of COVID-19. So even some of your clerical staff might actually be able to pick up second jobs with government departments at the moment, etc., to soften that blow for them. But there are some other things that we are going to talk about as well. And that was what the federal government support is. And this is all still one conversation, okay, which is really, it's complicated, but you need to be able to give people that sense of control that there are options available here, okay? So the first one is obviously the New Start. So they've doubled the New Start allowance, as you've probably heard, up to $1,100 a fortnight, and it's income tested. So what that means is if you've earned more than $1,100 in a fortnight, you won't get anything. It's then a sliding scale backwards. If you've earned nothing, you'll get the full $1,100, okay? So it's a supplement in terms of your income test. What you can say to the staff is that the federal government has removed the asset test from the New Start area, and they've also removed the qualification period. It used to be 6 weeks if you resign from a job, and 2 weeks, I think, if you were made redundant, etc. Anyway, there were some timing periods made for New Start. they've been removed. So that means that people who have lost their jobs or lost their incomes or suffered a reduction. It's important to note that the wording coming out from the government, if you have suffered a reduction, it doesn't mean that you've necessarily lost your whole job. So again, going back to that thing that's saying, if you've lost a certain amount, but you're still getting, say, $700 a fortnight, you'll be able to top that up to the $1,100 mark with an extra $400. What that New Start also does, Bud, is it also allows people to apply for rental assistance, which is about another $160 a fortnight, family tax benefit allowances, energy supplement, which is about paying your power bill. There's a communication allowance too, I think, for people looking for jobs for phones, etc. Also offers a healthcare card. So you may actually qualify for, the staff may qualify for healthcare cards. So adding all those up together actually may assist the employees achieve a balance of making sure that they can get through this next tough period. The next part of it is also about superannuation. So as of the 1st of April, employees will be able to access $10,000 this financial year and $10,000 next financial year from a tax-free withdrawal from their super. Now, the good news is this is also available to sole traders and casuals, and they're eligible if 20% or more of their income has been reduced. Okay, so for sole traders who are paying less than $1 million a year in wages, which is an awful lot of us, it's a situation that you can actually get access to your superannuation and going from there. There's a couple of other things that's going to help the business in terms of not really employees unless they're retired or they decide to become retired, etc. The deeming rates have been reduced by another 25%, which helps retirees in terms of what their incomes are like from their self-funded retiree areas. If they don't work and they don't have an income, they don't obviously get the New Start allowance, but they then get an extra $750 from the July 13th. That's on top of the other $750 that was announced the other day. So that's $1,500 that's coming to pensioners and war veterans and things like that, and going from there. And the retirees also are now only have to draw down 2% of their super rather than 4%. So hopefully that means that they can manage their money as well. So those things are there to try and help employees, and they're important for the employees to know about. The MyGov, to apply for those things, they will need a MyGov account. My understanding from our first webinar that we held a couple of hours ago, the MyGov website crashed this morning because of overuse. Not unexpected, I don't think, given the severity of what's happened with the pubs and clubs. But again, keeping your staff calm to say, look, it will happen. You just need to take your time and let the first wave of people get in and get their stuff sorted. The legislation hasn't been approved as yet. That's happening today in Canberra. The Labor Party isn't going to stop that going through, etc. But again, all of these things need legislation to go through before they will actually commence. But it is being fast-tracked as much as possible. Now, what support is there for employers to help with this? Okay, so small to medium enterprises, and my understanding that medium enterprises is those up to $50 million turnover, will receive at least $20,000 or up to $100,000 back from the government, okay, as a cash flow. This money has also been extended to not-for-profits, again, with less than 50 million turnover, and it will be automatically paid over the next 6 months. There's no new forms to be done, and my understanding is it'll be done through the business activity statements, etc. Talk to your accountants, because your accountants will know more about this. I haven't got an exact date about what the next 6 months will mean or how quickly that money will flow. There's no detail about that at the present time. So we will try and keep you up to date on that as soon as we know, but it won't, I don't think it'll be particularly quick, but it will happen. The other one that the federal government announced in a 50-50 partnership with the banks yesterday was a low interest loan for a period of 3 years with no repayments for the first 6 months. And it's an unsecured loan. So there's no asset attached to the loan. So it's up to 250,000 of a low interest loan with no repayments for 6 months. That is an option for organisations to take if they want to supplement wages or etc. The next point is about supporting employers. It's a double-edged sword for us. I've already talked a little bit about payment terms and things like that, but the insolvency threshold has been raised from $2,000 to $20,000, and it's giving people 6 months to respond to the insolvency claim rather than 21 days. Really dangerous, this, in terms of double-edged sword. It will give employers like electrical contractors room to move, and that they won't be accused of trading insolvently if they otherwise would have been. However, what it does mean is that if you've got someone else who's trading insolvently, then you're at risk of losing that money, and you won't get that money for 6 months and you can't wind them up. Building construction industry, we know we only get about 10 cents on the dollar in terms of a bankruptcy anyway. But this brings me back to the point about payment terms. And I really want a lot of members to think about their payment terms at the moment. I know it'll be tough in terms of going against, oh, we've never done it this way. However, I think, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And it's a balancing act with cash flow and work coming in and the work being on promise, etc. It's something that people are going to really struggle with, and we realise that. I haven't got any simple answers. But it is something that everybody will go through, but it is something that you probably need to make a decision over probably sooner rather than later. The last one really probably won't affect most of our members. It's about the Corporations Act and the requirements of the Corporation Act. The Treasurer has given himself some special powers to address that in terms of meeting in public places for annual general meetings, etc., and going from there. So, but yeah. So, saying all of that, and it's an extensive amount of information to hit you within 28 minutes. All of that taking into account, you then have to sit down and think, right, when's the right time to have the discussion with staff? Okay, and it might be now, but at least now you've got more information to give them, you've got more options for them, you've got more options for the business. Okay, so it's really important that you communicate what you're thinking. Okay. The situation that you've got, I would be sitting down with the staff and saying, here's as much information as I've got. What are the possible options? And let the staff talk about their possible options. As a group, you then might decide to have one-on-one meetings with staff a bit later. Ask for employees, views and preferences. Okay, it's really important to be open and honest about this sort of stuff. Having everybody in the shed at the same time, so to speak, and having a discussion with them about it and where you are is really important, because it does keep people calm and it kills off the rumour mill. One of the things that will happen really quickly in this, and we've seen it across society in the last month, is the rumour mill, the panic buying, the pressure people are under. It makes people do silly things sometimes. So if we give the people the information, make sure they've got that power, and that you discuss it with them, you've got some chance of maintaining a sense of calm. Maintain an open door policy, and whatever you come up with, particularly leave without pay, etc. And I'll talk a little bit more about those options for full-timers, part-timers and casuals in the next slide. Make sure you document everything that you're doing. Okay, document what you're telling the staff, document what you're doing, just to make sure that you've got evidence there in case anything goes wrong in the future. And don't forget, we're always here. You can always ring us and talk us through. We can talk through numerous times about what's happening inside your business and what's happening with your staff. It's really easy to do. We do it all the time. It's just that it's on a bit longer or a bit larger scale now, with more members affected at the one time. So we have been through this with a lot of people. We've stood people down before in North Queensland. We've stood people down in New South Wales for fires and all those sorts of things. So It's not unusual for us to give advice on this sort of stuff, and you're not alone. Okay, really important to understand that. Here's some suggested wording. You know, it's not a script. I wouldn't treat it as a script, but, you know, we're looking at all measures to maintain the viable workforce and viable business. It's a difficult balancing act, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Have a read of that. Use your own words. I wouldn't read this out or anything because it just won't seem genuine. And what you want to do is be genuine with your workforce, okay? So in your own words, tell them that you're open to suggestions. Give them the information that they need and help them. Ask them if they've got any questions and maybe identify a few information sources they can go to. If people are really struggling psychologically, Beyond Blue, Lifeline, all those sort of things, they're all free services. Mates in Construction are stepping up to the plate. We're doing some negotiating with them at the moment about some services that'll be available, etc. So it'll be a heightened time of emotion and it'll be really important for us to pull together to make sure people don't feel despondent and get to that, you know, dark place, I suppose, is what we want to avoid. And that includes yourself as contractors particularly. As I said before, document your outcomes, but document all your leave takings. Now, one thing I want to talk about now is full-time employees. The immediate reaction was, I've had it from a couple of members, is, oh, I'll just change all my employees to casuals. That's actually quite a dangerous thing to do. And the reason being is that that action would then mean that you've made them redundant immediately. Okay, so if you've got a cash flow issue and then all of a sudden you have to pay notice and severance pay, then you've got more pressure on your business in terms of your cash flow. But people going on leave without pay. So you can have a person who's a full-time employee on 38 hours a week and they might say, yes, I'll take 2 days a week of leave without pay. They're still full-time. They still accrue annual leave, sick leave on their 2.5 days or 3 days a week. And then the other 2 days is leave without pay. That 2 days a week leave without pay doesn't break their continuity of service. It doesn't break their full-time contract. It doesn't affect anything. It's just another type of leave. Leave without pay is just another type of leave. It's just that it's without pay. So they're still full-time. So they're still engaged, they're still employed, okay? So that gives you an option of reducing your costs with their agreement, okay? Again, leave form with their signature on it saying, yes, I agree, okay? Eventually, you might say, let's take a week, let's take a 2-day thing, or whatever it happens to be. Document what you've agreed to. Have a review date. It might be, let's review it in 2 weeks' time. Let's review it in 4 weeks' time. Whatever needs to happen. Converting full-time employees to part-time or casual, as I said, it will instigate a redundancy, so you do need to be careful about that. Okay, it's at your initiative. You're saying, I'm going to make you part-time. You're saying to them, at my initiative, I'm going to make you part-time. So therefore, you're repudiating the full-time contract, which means that that's a redundancy. Okay, so that's difficult. If we'd like you to talk to us about the circumstances that you're going through to do that, because there may be other ways, and it's a very complicated. It's complicated to explain it succinctly in a webinar like this without having some real examples to work with. But we'll just leave it at that at the moment. As I said, document. Part-time employees, same as full-time. So if you're reducing hours, you might have someone on 20 hours a week and you want to reduce them down to 10. Their employment contract might say 20 hours a week. If you're then offering them a new one at 10 hours a week, you're basically effectively making the part-time position at 20 hours a week redundant, and you're creating a redundancy situation and you're offering them another contract. So be careful about what you do in those respects. Casuals are casuals. Now, one thing I do want to be careful is that in the term casual, we are talking about people who are employed sporadically on irregular hours and et cetera, okay? True sense of the word casual. What we are not talking about are 10-year, 5-year full-time employees who get a casual rate of pay, okay? If you have long-term casuals who are consistent in hours, etc., please give us a ring. Again, There are circumstances where you may be able to dismiss them. There are circumstances where you may not be able to make them, what happens in a redundancy, etc., etc. We need to talk about that with you and talk you through about what the risks of that are, given their long standing. Keeping in mind that there is an obligation under the electrical award that there is a conversion from casual to full-time, and there's a whole process that goes with that. So, okay. I think that, yeah, so from that point of view, that's where we sit at the moment. It's a quick scan through some of the tips and tricks that we've been talking about with members over the last little while. I haven't seen any questions pop up. Does anybody have any questions that they want to pop into the Q&A area? Because I'm happy to take some questions. No questions? Okay. We will put up, is there any incentives for apprentices? In terms of apprentices, yes. The incentive that came from the apprentices was in the first tranche of help from the federal government. Small employers under 20 employees employing apprentices will receive a subsidy, I suppose, of 50%. To keep their apprentices engaged. Again, we're waiting for the legislation to go through for that to go, and we're still waiting for the form to be created so that we can fill that out and get that money flowing. So my understanding is if they're engaged as of the 1st of January, they will get 50% of the wages they've earned between 1st of January and 30th of March. And then again from 1st of April through to June, and then from June through to September, they'll go from there. So yes, so in terms of incentives for apprentices, it's approximately 50% of their wage. Michael, if we go into full lockdown, where do we stand with staff being let go? Michael, in terms of section 524, that if we go into full lockdown, that is a complete stand down of employees. So the government will say to us, no work, construction work, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff is unessential, and that everybody is to stay in their home and go from there. That will be a stand down, and the employees will be stood down. Now, from a stand down point of view, they can ask for paid leave through that period of time if they've got it. But if they don't have the leave up, then it's leave. It's basically without pay and going from there. So, what is they only started on the 9th of this month? If they've only started on the 9th of this month, I think, Jacob, you're referring to apprentices, then yes, they will get the subsidy, but obviously it will only be from this month. But also if they are a restarting apprentice, so if they were with somebody else and you've picked them up, there is more incentives available from the federal government. I don't know what they are exactly, but if you want to give, actually, I will find out for you and put it up. I'll ask one of our partners to give you some info on that. But yeah, there is some stuff available there. If we have part-time employees that work 25 hours, we need to reduce to 20 hours or 15 hours a week. How is that best to be approached? By agreement. So if we can get them to agree in writing that they want to voluntarily change their hours based on what you've spoken about prior to, that is the best way to go with that. Your situation in terms of softening that blow for them is that if their 25 hours is less than $1,100 a fortnight, they will be able to apply for the COVID-19 supplement from Centrelink. So yeah, so that'll be good. Can we send down employees, and if so, for how long? We are doing another webinar shortly about stand down. It is a complicated area, and it's something that we need to clearly go through so you've got some processes with. Okay, so yes, you can stand down employees in the event that there is like the government lockdown, if there is a specific reason why you can need to stand down everyone down like a lockdown, that can happen. However, if you are saying that your business is simply out of work, then that actually may be moving more into the redundancy area and rolling up the business. So again, please give us a call about those sort of circumstances, because we will need to discuss with you the specific issues that are going on inside your business. Is the apprentice incentive on top of any state incentive? Yes, that is correct. The federal incentive is on top of anything else the states have actually asked for. Sally has asked, what happens if full-timers and they have no leave left? Sally, if you're talking about stand down provisions, for example, then and they have no leave left, then it's no pay. It's no pay. So if you're talking about them having sick leave or parental duties required, again, if there's no leave left, it's no pay. They can still take the leave, but there's no payment required. When is the webinar being held? We will let you know about the stand down. We are quite busy at the moment, as you can imagine, but we are hoping to hold that within the next probably Wednesday. That we will hold that one. So we've got another one of these ones happening tomorrow, and then Wednesday we will try and do the stand down provision. We also do have a number of other applications and appearances before the Fair Work Commission happening over the next couple of days. That was old work that still continues, so we're just a little bit under the pump at the moment because we're still getting ready for those things and going from there. So we will keep you advised. Also, everybody, apparently we have just live streamed this webinar on Facebook page. So keep an eye on the members Facebook page, and as we aim to do more live streaming to keep everybody up to date. Sally's just come back and said, if they are still employed on leave without pay, what government incentives are there? Sally, in terms of that, the effective leave without pay has no effect on the government incentives for employers. If you when you qualify for the $20,000 to $100,000 grant, that will come automatically to you, regardless of whether your staff are on pay or not. All of those incentives are not contingent on employees being on leave without pay. If we have to let staff go due to lack of work, do we have to pay redundancy? And if we are in financial hardship? So the redundancy will, if there is a situation where the redundancies have to happen and the business is closing, then yes, they will still need to happen. If there is financial hardship and for example, if you are saying that you do not have the cash flow, the federal government's fair entitlement guarantee scheme will still be there. We would have to probably, we'd have to then go through a situation of making sure that the employees can actually apply to that fund to actually get their entitlements through the fair entitlement guarantee scheme. And then that would then become a debt on the contractor to pay back to the fair entitlement guarantee scheme when the finances become available later on. Can we make employees redundant and then hire them as a casual? Yes, you can make employees redundant as long as you follow the normal procedures for redundancy, including consultation and making sure that there is. However, what I'm not saying is that you cannot hire them back as a full-time casual. Okay, so Wade, just be careful in terms of what you're asking in that respect. So yes, you can make employees redundant if you have no full-time work left, if they are currently full-time, and then hire them back as casuals. You might have the odd bit of work here or there, but if you intend to try and make them redundant and then hire them as full-time casuals with a 25% loading, that won't be a genuine redundancy, and the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman would frown upon that really seriously, particularly now. Okay, so just be careful what you mean by can you make employees redundant and then hire them as casuals. How can we protect our workers on site working on essential services? If you're talking about PPE and about the processes, etc., that's been well covered in terms of some information that Colin and the Workplace Health and Safety team put out. Most of the construction unions and the employer associations in the construction industry are very keen to make sure that construction sites stay open. So social distancing works, PPE works, etc., etc. So yes, you can protect your workers when working on site for essential services. And if you need some resources on that, please have a chat to the Workplace Health and Safety guys here. From one of the members, if we do go into the 14-day isolation and our employees have no leave and it's unpaid time off, do they have access to any government funding for this unpaid time? Yes, they will. So in that period of time, I am assuming that they will get access to New Start. It will be $1,100 plus all the family tax benefit, blah, 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 blah. So yes, literally, there were no caveats on the $1,100 being subject to lockdowns or anything. So yes, there will be $1,100. The other thing that has just popped into my brain too, the banks have also started to say that mortgages and investment loans for mortgages for rental properties are available for a 6-month deferral of payment. So there is a situation where another stressor for employees particularly is probably their mortgage. Maybe suggest to the employees, talk to your bank, see because if you're going to lose your job or if you're going to be on reduced income, talk to your bank, make sure that the bank is available to take that into consideration, maybe suspend payments for 6 months so that they can get through this next 6-month period. And I think the figures at the moment is 30 to 50% of people most mortgages today take 30 to 50% of the income of people. So if that income if the income is reduced and the banks can hold off on requiring payment, that will take a lot of pressure off a lot of people. And the $1,100 obviously from Centrelink goes a lot further in terms of food and daily expenses, etc. I figure if there is only work for everyone 3 to 4 hours a day, it will be hard to keep them all employed. Yes, that is true. So if there is only 3 to 4 hours of work a day for, say, 10 people, then that might only be enough work for 2 people or 1 person in that case. So yes, you've got some important decisions to make if that is the case. And again, going back through that process that I spoke about before, about what skills do you need, what work will continue, etc., etc. They are some pretty tough decisions that you might have to make. Again, please give us a ring and we can go from there. Employees can get New Start even if they are still employed on leave without pay. My understanding, and from what the press conference from the Prime Minister said the other day, was clearly this: if your income has reduced and it's reduced below the $1,100 a fortnight amount, and you can show that, my understanding from the Prime Minister's press conference the other day was that they could get a sliding scale of assistance to get them up to that $1,100 safety net. Okay, that was my understanding from the press conference. Again, I haven't seen the legislation come through from the Parliament as yet. So again, that's the best information I've got. We have put on the website and also on the Facebook group the link to the federal government's stimulus package, etc. I don't think it says much more than that at this stage, but happy to re-put that up as we go through. If an employee is sick and self-isolates on medical recommendation as they are they entitled to sick pay for this 14-day period? If the medical recommendation, so there'll be a medical certificate saying this person needs to self-isolate, then yes. If the medical certificate says they need to self-isolate, well, the medical certificate will say a medical condition. So yes, that will happen. So and be payable. What else? I think that's about it. What have we got? There we go. Well, I think that's about it. All the questions seem to have stopped. So look, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending. I hope you have found that useful. Again, if there's any questions, read the question of the medical, is it just sick leave being used or personal carers leave too? It's one and the same. Sick leave and personal carers leave is all the same bucket. So it's just the 10 days per year that they've accrued since they started working. So yeah, so it's just whatever sick leave, personal leave they've got open to them. Thanks everybody. As I said, I hope you found this informative. I hope it's given you some ideas about how to approach your staff. Best of luck in terms of making sure your business is continuing to run. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything that you might want further information on, let us know. We will do a stand down presentation Wednesday, and yeah, we'll go from there. So one last question. So Andrew has asked, so better to get in early and send on leave? Look, I don't know at this stage. My advice would be probably hang off on sending them on leave at this stage. With all the work is continuing. You know, so from my point of view, I would be trying to strongly suggest that we keep the employees as gainfully employed as possible. There will be construction sites that will be looking for employees and stuff like that around the place. So yeah, can we force them to take leave? It depends what you mean by force, Wade. You know, there is a situation where you can. It's called redundancy. There's you know at any given time there's a situation where a discussion will lead to a decision having to be made. If the choice is, mate, you either go on leave or there's no job for you, then you have to make a decision. If he says, well, I'm not taking leave, well, you say, well, unfortunately, then that's the end of it. So, and then you have to go through the redundancy process. So again, it's, yeah, can we force them to take leave? Yeah, under the Electrical Communications Act, the shutdown period for leave is due Christmas time and go from there. So the rest of the time, the leave has to be taken by mutual agreement. So, yeah. Okay, so all right, I hope we've answered a few questions there. As I said, good luck with it all. Please give us a call, 1300 889 198. Join the Facebook group if you need to as well, and we'll keep you up to date as much as we can. So enjoy your afternoon and keep safe and yeah, smooth sailing. Thanks, guys. See ya.